Hello, hello, hello. It's your boy Johan, and welcome to my ASMR channel. Last video was a deck tour. I have, I think I have about 5 decks in total, so I might do a bit more, especially if you'll let me know if you want to see them. I also intend to utilize this to get a little bit better at my enunciation and dictation. And so I'm going to be reading Norse myths. In this video, you can expect page turning sounds, I'm not sure what else yet. I'm kind of going off the script with this. Well, no script at all, and ADHD, so chaos. May chaos take control. So I am going to be reading Norse myths, specifically myths of Loki, because chaos. Yes, I have a folio of fancies as a bookmark in my folio that I fancy. I hope that this can be relaxing to you. I hope that it can help you with your stress relief or with sleep if that need be. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Well, at least if you enjoy my voice. I think I'll stick to soft speaking for now. I'm not that well at whispering, and I'm trying really hard to not smack my lips too much. I kind of have big lips, but you see the color of my skin, that might be a given. So here we go with the Legends of Loki. I am going to make a lot of mistakes. I'm going to be quite honest with you. I will make a lot of mistakes. But we'll see how it goes. With Norse myths. Oh no, I lost my page. I know there may be some background noise. My apartment isn't necessarily the most quiet of places, but hopefully it will not be too distracting. So here we go with Legends of Loki. Odin, dost thou remember when we in early days blended our blood together? When to taste beer, thou didst constantly refuse unless to both 'twas offered. Benjamin Thorpe, Seaman's Edda. Besides the hideous giant Utgard Loki, the personification of mischief and evil, whom Thor and his companions visited in Jotunheim, the ancient northern nations had another type of sin, whom they called Loki also, and whom we have already seen under many different aspects. In the beginning, Loki was merely the personification of the hearth fire and of the spirit of life. At first a god, he gradually becomes god and devil combined, and ends in being held in general detestation as an exact counterpart of the medieval Lucifer, the prince of lies, the originator of deceit, and the backbiter of the Aesir. By some authorities, Loki was said to be the brother of Odin, but others assert that the two were not related, but had merely gone through the form of swearing blood brotherhood common in the north. Speaking on Loki's character, I'm going to make so many mistakes and I'm leaving it all in. I am going to leave it all in. While Thor is the embodiment of northern activity, Loki represents recreation and the close companionship early established between these two gods shows very plainly how soon our ancestors realized that both were necessary to the welfare of mankind. Thor is ever busy and ever in earnest, but Loki makes fun of everything. Until at last his love of mischief leads him entirely astray, and he loses all love for goodness and becomes utterly selfish and malevolent. He represents evil in the seductive and seemingly beautiful form in which it parades through the world. Because of this deceptive appearance, the gods did not first avoid him, but treated him as one of themselves in all good fellowship, taking him with them whenever they went, and admitting him only to their merrymakings, but also to their council hall, where, unfortunately, they too often listened to his advice. As we have already seen, Loki played a prominent part in the creation of man, endowing him with the power of motion and causing the blood to circulate freely through his veins, whereby he was inspired with passion as personification of the fire and, well, as of mischief. Loki, lightning, is often seen with Thor, thunder, whom he accompanies to Jotunheim to recover his hammer, to Utgard Loki's castle, and to Geirrod's house. It was he who steals Freya's necklace and Sif's hair and betrays Udon into the power of Thiassi. And although he sometimes gives the gods good advice and affords them real help, it is only to extricate them for some predicament into which he has rashly inveigled them. Some authorities declare that instead of making part of the creative trilogy, Odin, Honir, and Ludor or Loki, this god originally belonged to a pre-Odinic race of deities and was the son of the great giant Frotnir or Ymir, his brothers being Kari, air, and Hilar, water, and his sister Ran, the terrible goddess of the sea. Other mythologies, however, make him the son of the giant Farabuti, who has been identified with Begirmir and the sole survivor of the deluge, and of Laufeyr, Leafy Isle, or Nile, vessel, his mother, thus stating that this connection with Odin was only that of the northern oath of good fellowship. Loki, fire, first married Glut, glow, who bore him two daughters, Isa, embers, and Inmyria, ashes. I am very sure I am butchering those names. I am so sure I am butchering those names. I'm leaving it all in. You'll get an authenticity over here. It is therefore very evident that Norsemen considered him emblematic of the hearth fire. And when the flaming wood crackles on the hearth, the good wives in the north all still want to say that Loki is beating his children. Besides this wife, Loki is also said to have wedded the giantess Angerboda, the anguish-boding, who dwelt in Jotunheim, and who, as we have already seen, bore him the three monsters, Hel, goddess of death, the Midgard snake Jormungandr, and the grim wolf Fenrir. Loki's third marriage was with, I don't know this one. Loki's third marriage was with Sigyn, who proved a most loving and devoted wife, and bore him two sons, Narve and Vali, a latter namesake of the god who avenged Balder. Sigyn was always faithful to her husband and did not forsake him even when he definitely being cast out of Asgard and confined in the bowels of the earth. As Loki was the embodiment of evil in the minds of the northern races, they entertained nothing but fear in him, built no temples to his honor, offered no sacrifices to him, and designed and designated the most noxious weeds by his name. The quivering, overheat, the quivering, overheated atmosphere of summer was supposed to be betoken of his presence, for the people would then want to remark that Loki was sowing his wild oats. And when the sun appeared to be drawing water, they said that Loki was drinking. The story of Loki is so inextricably woven with that of other gods that most of the myths relating to him have already been told, and there remain but 2 episodes of his life to relate, one showing his better side before he had degenerated into the arch-deceiver, and the other illustrating how he finally induced the gods to defile their peace steads by willful murder. First story, Loki and the necklace. Out of the morning land, over the snowdrifts, beautiful Freya came. Charles Kingsley, The Longbird Saga. One evening, when Freya had become part of Asgard, Loki spied her marvelous necklace, a golden symbol of the fruitfulness of the earth which she wore about her slender neck at all times. Loki coveted this necklace, and he found he could not sleep until he had it in his possession. So, it was that he crept one night into her chamber and bent over her as if to remove it. Finding that her position in sleep made this feat impossible, he turned himself into a small flea, and springing under her bedclothes, he bit the lovely goddess so that she turned in her sleep. Loki returned to his shape and undid the clasp of the necklace, which he removed without rousing Freya. This man Loki, always turning into some creature and doing some craziness. Loki. Not far from Freya's place, Heimdall had heard the sound of Loki becoming a flea, a sound so slight that only the great watchman of the gods could have heard it, and he traveled immediately to the palace to investigate. He saw Loki leaving with the necklace, and soon caught up to him, drawing his sword in order to remove the thief's head. Loki immediately changed himself into a thin blue flame, but quick as a flash, Heimdall became a cloud and sent down a sheet of rain in order to douse the flame. Loki quickly became a polar bear and opened his jaws to swallow the water, whereupon Heimdall turned himself into a bear and attacked the hapless trickster. In haste, Loki became a seal and then attacked the once again Heimdall transformed himself in the same form as Loki, and the two fought for many hours before Heimdall showed his worth and won the necklace from Loki. I really hope you all not hear any background noise. Loki does be overdoing it. Loki does be overdoing it. Second story, Skrismali and the Peasant's Child. Many a time has been exposed the gods to very great perils, and often extricated them again by his artifacts. A giant and a peasant were playing a game together one day, probably a game of chess. which was a favorite winter pastime within northern Vikings. They of course are determined to play for certain stakes, and the giant, being victorious, won the peasant's only son, whom he said he would come and claim on the morrow, unless the parents could hide him so cleverly that he could not be found. Knowing that such a feat would be impossible for them to perform, the parents fervently prayed to Odin to help, and in answer to their entreaties, the god came down to earth and changed the boy into a tiny grain of wheat, which he hid in an ear of grain in the midst of a large field, declaring that the giants would not be able to find him. The giant Skrizmali, the giant Skriz, Skriz, Scrimsly. I pronounced it wrong. Scrimsly. The giant Scrimsly, however, possessed wisdom far beyond what Odin imagined, and failing to find the child at home, he strode off immediately to the field with his scythe, and mowing the wheat, he selected the particular area where the boy was hidden. Counting over the grains of wheat, he was about to lay his hand upon the right one when Odin, hearing the child's cry of distress, snatched the kernel out of the giant's hand and restored the boy to his parents, telling them that he had done all in his power to help them. But as the giant vowed he had been cheated and would again claim the boy on the morrow unless the parents could outwit him, the unfortunate peasants now turned to Hoenir for aid. The god heard them graciously and changed the boy into a fluff of down, which he hid in the breast of a swan swimming in the pond close by. Now, when, a few minutes later, Scrimsly came up, he guessed what had occurred, and, seizing the swan, he bit off its neck, and would have swallowed it down had not Hoenir wafted it away from his lips out of reach, restoring the boy safe and sound to his parents, but telling them that he could not further aid them. Scrimsly, 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 Scrimsly. I need to get that down because I will keep saying Scrimsly. I will keep saying Scrimsly. So here's some Scrimsly, 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 Scrimsly. The giant Scrimsly, Scrimsly. Let's hope that's enough. Scrimsly warned the parents that he would make a third attempt to secure the child, whereupon they applied in their despair to Loki, who carried the boy out to sea and concealed him as a tiny egg in the roe of a flounder. Returning from his expedition, Loki encountered the giant near the shore, and seeing that he was bent upon a fishing excursion, he insisted upon accompanying him. He felt somewhat uneasy lest the terrible giant should have seen through his device, and therefore thought it would be well for him to be upon the spot in case of need. Scrimsly baited his hook and was more or less successful in his angling, when suddenly he drew up the identical flounder in which Loki had concealed the little charge. Opening the fish upon his knee, the giant proceeded to minutely examine the roe until he found the egg which he was seeking. Scrimsly has magic powers. Nobody can convince me otherwise that Scrimsly does not have magic powers by which he uses to do this. Because how exactly in the world are you going to know that they turned them into roe if nobody knows roe is fish eggs? So how do you know that Loki turned the boy into a fish egg and then hide that fish egg in more fish eggs and then hide those fish eggs in a flounder in that particular lake? This Scrimsly has some kind of, I don't know, but he's outwitting gods, and that's crazy to me because he's supposed to be just a giant. The plight of the boy was certainly perilous, but Loki, watching his chance, snatched the egg out of the giant's grasp and transforming it again into a child, He instructed him secretly to run home, passing through the boathouse on his way and closing the door behind him. The terrified boy did as he was told. Immediately he found himself on land, and the giant, quick to observe his flight, dashed after him into the boathouse. Now Loki had cunningly placed a sharp spike in such a position that the great head of the giant ran full tilt against it, and he sank to the ground with a groan. Whereupon Loki, seeing him helpless, cut off one of his legs. What? What in the world? What is what in the world? No. He cut off one of his legs. Imagine the god's dismay, however, when he saw the pieces join and immediately knit together. But Loki was a master of guile, and recognizing this for the work of magic, you see, he had magic. I called it. I called it. He had magic. And recognizing this as the work of magic, he cut off the other leg, promptly throwing flint and steel between the severed limb, and struck, and thereby hindering any further. So apparently fire is the enemy of sorcery. I'll keep that in mind. The peasants were immensely relieved to find that their enemy was slain, and ever after they considered Loki the mightiest of all the heavenly council, for he had delivered them effectually from their foe, while the other gods had lent only temporary aid. This, I cannot with this. Firstly, who tells you to go and make a bet with a giant? Like, who told you to go and make a bet with a giant that you cannot win? And on top of that, on top of the fact that you made a bet with a giant that you cannot win, he sought to deceive and trick the giant out of his fairly won prize. What in the world? What in the world? They were in the wrong. You made a bet. You clearly overestimated your ability at playing chess. You lost the bet. And then you did not want to hold up your end of the bargain with the bet. What is this? That's not fair. That's not fair at all. But concerning Scrimsly definitely was using sorcery. He may have won the bet by less than honest means, because he used sorcery to heal his legs. And if he used sorcery to heal his legs, who is to say that he also did not use sorcery to find out where to hit the boy? And if it is he used sorcery to find out where it is to hit the boy, who it is to say that he also did not use sorcery to win that game of chess? Either way, the peasants are at fault, in my opinion. I mean, y'all could let me know what you think. I would love to hear your opinion, but in my opinion, I think that the peasants are still at fault regardless of if it is sorcery was used or not, because you made a bet and you lost the bet. And nowhere in the beginning of this story did it state that he used sorcery to win the bet. It just stated that they did not want to give up their child. But why would you bet your child? Why would you bet your child to a giant in a game of chess? What insanity is that? What craziness is that? These Norsemen were wilding. They were wilding. Next story. The giant architect. To Asgard came an architect. and castle offered to erect, a castle high which should defy deep Jotun guile and giant raid. And this mostly wildly compact maid, fair Freya, with the moon and sun, as price the fortress being done. Oh, that's a nice poem. Notwithstanding their wonderful bridge by Frost, the tremendous way, and the watchfulness of Heimdall, the gods could not feel entirely secure in Asgard, and were often fearful lest the frost giants should make their way into Asgard. To obviate this possibility, they finally decided to build an impregnable fortress. And while they were planning how this would be done, an unknown architect came with an offer to undertake the construction, provided the gods would give him sun, moon, and Freya, the goddess of youth and beauty, as a reward. The gods were wroth at such presumptuous an offer, but when they would have indignantly driven the stranger from their presence, Loki urged them to make a bargain, which it would be impossible for the stranger to keep. And so they finally told the architect that their guerdon should be his, provided the fortress were finished in the course of a single winter, and that he accomplished the work with no other assistance than that of his horse, Svaldefair. Sval. Sva. Svadilfair. 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 That's an interesting name. I need to drink some water. Svadilfair. The unknown architect agreed to these seemingly impossible conditions and immediately set out to work, holding ponderous blocks of stone by night, building during the day, and progressing so rapidly that the gods began to feel somewhat anxious. Ere long, they noticed that more than half the labor was accomplished by the wonderful steed, Svaldilfair. And when they saw near the end of the winter that the work was finished, save only one portal, which they knew the architect could easily erect during the night, terrified lest they should be called upon to part not only with the sun and moon, but also with Freya, the personification of youth and beauty of the world, the gods turned upon Loki and threatened to kill him unless he devised some means of hindering the architect from finishing the work within the specified time. Loki's cunning proved once more equal to the situation. He waited until nightfall on the final day, when Svadilfair, when Svadilfair passed the fringe of a forest, painfully dragging one of the great blocks of stone required for the termination of work. He rushed out from the dark glade in the guise of a mare and neighed so invitingly. I know where this is going. I know this story. I've heard this story. I know where this is going. And neighed so invitingly that in trice the horse kicked himself free of his harness and ran after the mare, closely pursued by his angry master. The mare galloped swiftly on, artfully luring the horse and master deeper and deeper into the forest shades, until the night was nearly done, and it was no longer possible to finish the work. The architect was none other than the redoubtable Hrimthurs in disguise, and he now turned to Asgard in towering rage at the fraud which had been practiced upon him. Assuming his wonted proportions, he would have annihilated the gods had not Thor suddenly returned from a journey and slain him with his magic hammer, Mjolnir, which he hurled with terrific force at his face. The gods had saved themselves on this occasion only by fraud and by the violent deed of Thor, and these were destined to bring great sorrow upon them, and eventually to secure their downfall and to hasten the coming of Ragnarok. Loki, however, felt no remorse for his part, and in due time, it is said, he became the parent of an 8-footed steed. He became the parent of an 8-footed steed called Sleipnir, which, as we have seen, was Odin's favorite mount. Loki performed so many evil deeds during his career that he richly deserved the title of Arch-Deceiver, which was given to him. He was generally hated. Oh, voice going. He was generally hated for his subtle, malicious ways and for an inveterate habit of prevarication, which won for him also the title of Prince of Lies. Loki gave up his horse Pussy. Again, like, this story tells so much, not just of Loki, but of the gods themselves. They were schemers and scammers, and I mean, if I want something done, and I am quite fine in doing it myself, why would I attempt to trick somebody else to doing it for me? And they allow Loki to chain up their heads. This man be wildin'. This man be wildin'. I think the last story I'll read for this one, because I'm seeing it's been a half hour and my voice is starting to give out. I do not talk that often in my day-to-day life, and this has been proven to be a bit much on my voice. But regardless, I hope you've enjoyed it so far. It's been relaxing, if not hilarious, and it could help you, whether it be to chill out, wind down, or fall asleep. Loki's last crime. Now to assuage the high gods' grief, and bring their mourning some relief, from coral caves, neath ocean waves, mighty King Aegir invited the Aesir to festival in Helenzi's hall, that thou for Balder every guest was grieving yet, he might forget a while his woe in friendly feast. Loki's last crime. Loki's last crime, and the one which filled his measure of iniquity, was to induce Hoder to throw the fatal mistletoe at Balder, whom he hated merely on account of his immaculate purity. Perhaps even this crime might have been condoned had it not been for his obduracy. I'm gonna read that over. Perhaps even this crime might have been condoned had it not been for his obduracy, when, in the disguise of an old woman Tuk, he was called upon to shed a tear for Balder. His action on this occasion convinced the gods that nothing but evil remained within him, and they pronounced unanimously upon him the sentence of perpetual banishment from Asgard. To divert the gods' sadness and make them for a short time, forget the treachery of Loki and the loss of Balder. Aegir, god of the sea, invited them to partake of a banquet in his coral caves at the bottom of the sea. I think I know this story. Like, I have not read out this entire book. I've only read a few of them at the beginning. However, I grew up being a fan of Norse mythology. It's always been one of my favorites. I like Greek mythology too, and don't worry, I have Greek mythology books I can also read. So if you're all interested in hearing that, you can let me know. I have some Greek mythology books here that I can read as well. I think I know this story, and if it is the one I think it is, I'm gonna laugh. I will not be able to stop myself. To divert the gods' sadness and make them, for a short time, forget the treachery of Loki and the loss of Balder, Aegir, god of the sea, invited them to partake in a banquet in his coral caves at the bottom of the sea. The gods gladly accepted the invitation, and clad in their richest garb and festive smiles, they appeared in the coral caves at the appointed time. None were absent save the radiant Balder, for whom many a regretful sighs were heaved, and the evil Loki, whom none could regret. In the course of the feast, however, the last named god appeared in their midst like a dark shadow, and when bidden to depart, he gave vent to his evil passions in a torrent of invective against the gods. Then, jealous of the praises which Funhyun, Aegir's servant, had won, then jealous for the praises which Fun Feng. Then, in jealous of the praises which Fun Feng, Aegir's servant, had won for the dexterity with which he waited upon his master's guests, Loki suddenly turned upon him and slew him. At this wanton crime, the gods, in a fierce wrath, drove Loki away once more, threatening him with dire punishments should he ever appear before them again. Scarcely had the Aesir recovered from this disagreeable interruption to their feast, and resumed their places at the board when Loki came. No. Scarcely had the Aesir recovered from this disagreeable interruption to their feast, and resumed their places at the board, when Loki came creeping in once more, resuming his slanders with venomous tongue, and taunting the gods with their weaknesses or shortcomings, dwelling maliciously upon their physical imperfections, and derided them for their mistakes. This is not the story I thought it was. In vain the gods tried to stem his abuse. His voice rose louder and louder, and when he was just giving utterance to some base slander about Sif, when he was suddenly cut short by the sight of Thor's hammer, angrily brandished by the arm whose power he knew full well, and he fled incontentedly. Knowing that he could now have no hope of being admitted into Asgard again, and sooner or later the gods, knowing that he could now have no hope of being admitted into Asgard again, and that sooner or later the gods, seeing the effect of his evil deeds, would regret having permitted him to roam the world, and would try either to bind or slay him, Loki withdrew to the mountains, where he built himself a hut. This is the longest, sentence ever. This is the longest sentence ever. With 4 doors, which he always left wide open to permit of a hasty escape. Carefully laying his plans, he decided that if the gods should come in search of him, he would rush down in the neighboring cataract. According to tradition, the Frangar force or stream, and changing himself into a salmon would thus evade his pursuers. He reasoned, however, that although he could easily avoid any hook, it might be difficult for him to effect his escape if the gods should fashion a net like that of the sea goddess Ran. Haunted by this fear, he decided to test the possibility of making such a mesh and started to make one out of twine. He was still engaged upon the task when Odin, Kvasir, and Thor suddenly appeared in the distance. And knowing that they had discovered his retreat, Loki threw his half-finished net into the fire, and rushing through one of the ever-open doors, he leapt into the waterfall, where in the shape of a salmon, he hid amongst some stones in the bed of the stream. The gods, finding the hut empty, were about to depart, when Kvasir perceived the remains of the burnt net on the hearth. After some thought, an inspiration came to him. He had advised the gods to weave a similar implement and use it in the searching of their foe in the neighboring stream. Since it would be like Loki to choose such a method of baffling their pursuit. What in the world? How, I understand deduction is a skill, like the powers of deduction is a skill, but how in the world is it that you see a half-burnt net and instantly assume that I'm going to just continue. I think you all know where I'm going with this. Let's start over from the top. I got distracted. I am not editing any of this. The gods, finding the hut empty, were about to depart, when Kvasir perceived the remains of the burnt net on the hearth. After some thought, an inspiration came to him. He advised the gods to weave a similar implement and used it in the searching for their foe in a neighboring stream, since it would be, like Loki, to choose such a method of baffling their pursuit. This advice seemed good. Good to who, man? Good to who? This advice seemed good and was immediately followed. And the net finished, the gods proceeded to drag the stream. Loki eluded the net at its first cast by hiding at the bottom of the river between two stones, and when the gods weighed the mesh and tried a second time, he effected his escape by jumping upstream. A third attempt to secure him proved successful, however, for, as he once more tried to get away by a sudden leap, Thor caught him in midair and held him so fast that when he could not escape he could not escape. The salmon, whose slipperiness in the north is noted for its remarkably slim tail. The Norsemen attribute this to Thor's tight grasp upon his foe. Wait, so because all of salmon have a very slim tail, the Norsemen think that Loki and Thor is the reason. That's such an interesting train of thought. It's so cool to learn these things about how the older people thought about things. Because this don't make sense. This right here don't make any sense. Loki, now sullen, resumed his wonted shape, and his captors dragged him down into the cavern, where they made him fast, using as bonds the entrails of his son, Narve, who had been torn to pieces by Vali, his brother, whom the gods had changed into a wolf for the purpose. What in the world? One of these fetters was passed under Loki's shoulders and one under his loins, thereby securing him firmly hand and foot. But the gods, not feeling quite satisfied that the strips tough and enduring though they were, would not give way, changed them into adamant or iron. Skadi, the giantess, a personification of the cold mountain stream, who had joyfully watched the fettering of her foe, subterranean fire, now fastened a serpent directly over his head. Okay, yes, I do know this story. It's not the story that I thought it was prior. So that its venom would fall drop by drop upon his upturned face. But Sigyn, Loki's faithful wife, hurried with a cup to his side, and until the day of Ragnarok, she remained by him, catching the drops as they fell, and never leaving her post except when her vessel was full, and she was obligated to empty it. Only during her short absences would the drops of venom fall upon Loki's face, and then they caused such intense pain that he writhed in anguish, his efforts to get free shaking the earth and producing the earthquakes which so frighten mortals. Oh, that's such a cool thing there. Now I know how they thought about earthquakes. So we learn about how they thought salmon got their tail and how earthquakes came to be. In this painful position, Loki was destined to remain until the twilight of the gods, when his bonds would be loosed and he would take part in the fatal conflict on the battlefield of Vigrid, falling at last by the hand of Heimdall, who would be slain at the same time. As we have seen, the venom-dropping snake in this myth is the cold mountain stream, whose waters falling from time to time upon the subterranean fire evaporated the steam, which escapes through fissures and causes earthquakes and geysers, phenomena with which the inhabitants of Iceland, for instance, were familiar. That's interesting. My voice is giving out on me and my throat is dry. I may read more. Let me know if you enjoyed this. I know I made mistakes. I am purposefully leaving the mistakes in so that with time my progress can be documented, because this is also me documenting my ability to do dictation and to attempt to properly enunciate my words. Yeah, so I hope that this has been, if not entertaining, wait, I almost forgot. My folio of fancies, to bookmark my folio that I fancy. I hope that this has, if not been entertaining, has been calming or relaxing in a way that it can help you fall asleep or relieve the stress of the day, or any type of relief at all, as ASMR usually is a relief for people. I wish you all the best. If you enjoyed it, give me a like, give me a follow. If not, that's okay too. Good morning, good day, good night. Good morning, good day, good night. I hope you've enjoyed, and I wish you all the best.